Hey folks, I was asked to do a tutorial on my Jupiter Clouds animation, so I thought I'd show you how it was done, bar the 1 day of rendering time, which you can get excited about yourselves. So this is Modeler, and I just created a subdived box, used subdivide metaform on it, and ran that through a number of times. We're up to nearly 9,000 polygons on that, and that is also subdivided when we save it, so that it can be subdivided later in layout. It has a standard texture. It's just let's have a look. 100% luminous, no diffusion, texture map color applied to sort of auto size. Nothing fancy there. I did apply the image as a bump map, which sort of helped a little bit with showing highlights and shadows and what have you. Smoothing turned on, obviously. And that's that. Save the object and you're done. So in layout, this is the object loaded up. If we go to perspective view, see it's completely flat at the moment. It's just loaded in. And then in object properties even, we apply a displacement map, which was initially was fractal noise. So what I'll do is I'll just turn these two off. I'll turn that on. So there's a fractal noise there which is animated, which just gives a very slow ripple to the clouds. And then the other one that I did was just a height map. So we're basically just applying. I took the original image and I desaturated it, did a contrast crush on it, and then I've used that to essentially feed the height of this object. So combined, we actually get, and I've used additive and additive, 100% on both. And so we get the basic height distortion with a little bit of ripple. Then on top of that, we do the subdivision. It's important to do the displacement first and then the subdivision. Now initially, when I built the model, I built it only sort of like 10 squares wide, 10 squares tall, and when you subdivide it after you've displaced it, it looks dreadful. And if you subdivide it before you displace it, it's very pointy on all the peaks. So add plenty of base geometry in Modeler first and then subdivide it afterwards. So if you watch this edge here, it just softens that out a little bit. And so what we've got now is this, where we can see our troughs and things. Now it's not accurate, not by any stretch. You can see this red section here really should be, as I see it, should be flat in its own right. It shouldn't be on a slope, but it is. Now, a way afterwards that I thought about doing that was to, when I process the image to produce the desaturated image, don't do it, just desaturate all the colours. Pull the red channel out and maybe just work with that in isolation, or maybe just the blue channel, for example, because there's plenty of blue in white, but there isn't any in the red section. So that would help level things out, I think. So that's basically that as far as the setting up. If we go back to the camera view, you can see that the camera runs down into one of those lowland areas and finishes about there. Now, the way because obviously if you render this, it's just going to look like a set of textured polys, like a carpet with a picture printed on it. So I then used hypervoxels, which is tucked away in 2018. So hypervoxels, and basically what I'd done for this was I shaded them the color of the image, so they take on the picture, the color of the part of the picture that they're above. I have set them to 100 mil. I played about with higher subdivision and smaller particle size, but you don't get the kind of interaction with the particles. Also, when you get down into that lower section, you don't get any sort of cloud mist that you pass through before it goes black. So I found less of them, higher particle count, and that's good to go. As far as shading goes, it's just luminosity 250, just to try and balance it out with the background plate, and constant light. I'm not using any lights in the scene because there's no planet view, there's no sun facing and in shadow, so this is a completely isolated section. I mean, it's not even round, it's it's not curved, it's flat. So ambient intensity and that. So if we go to VPR, you'll see it renders up. It's fairly quick, this process. I'm using a 8-core Ryzen 1700. This isn't overclocked while I'm doing this recording, so it's ticking over at about 3.2, I think. 8 cores, 16 threads. So you can see that it's rendering the cloud section over the top of the original plate. And if I go forward to about 420 or thereabouts, you'll see we're starting to enter this trough in the ground, in the clouds rather. And when we get down to this, it's the render times in this section were way higher. I was able to render out the first 50 frames. They were coming out at about a minute a frame, and by the end it was maybe 10. So you can see we get this simulation of shadow. It's not really shadow because I'm not rendering any shadows at all on the hypervoxels. It's just from the image. It's the photo. So if I was actually rendering volumetric shadows and I was having a higher render quality, the render time would be absolutely astronomical, and it just wouldn't be viable unless you got a render farm. Now, actually, I have a farm of sorts. It's basically 4 old computers. So I've got my main Ryzen machine, 8-core, 16-thread, and I've got 3 i7s that I've cobbled together from spares, and I just use the NewTek render controller to drive the scene to that, and it picks out frames as required, and it just helps reduce the render time. So yeah, there we go. That is the Jupiter Cloud scene in Lightwave. I hope that's been helpful. Drop me some questions if you've got them. I'll try and answer them as best I can. But there you go. That's what I did. Bye.